You are watching, you are watching, you are watching, you are watching Pot TV. You are watching, you are watching, you are watching, you are watching Pot TV.
I'm a recovering alcoholic. I have not had any mind-altering substance at any time for 19 years, 4 months, and 11 days. We'll get to this at the end, but I might as well tell you now that having been a narc, having written for the U.S. Journal of Drug and Alcohol Dependence, more than 20 articles throughout the 80s, having sponsored many men in recovery for 19 years, being an expert on the subject, I can tell you that drug addiction is a medical, social, and spiritual problem. It is not a criminal problem. Anyway, we're on the subject of oil, but the hemp plant brought that up. There's lots of drug. But you see, the chemical companies can't let you have something for free in your backyard that they can charge you for and boost their stock price with.
Does everybody know their job's name?
David Malmo-levine! My name is David Malmo-levine!
So you move a little too fast, breathing in the dream. Baby, get your head a bit mad, shake it and don't dream. So you move a little too fast, you're floating in a dream. Baby, get your head a bit mad, I'm moving through your dream.
You are watching High Society with your host, David Malmo-levine.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of High Society. My name is David Malmo-levine, and today we're looking at Mike Ruppert. We just went to see him do his Truth and Lies of 9/11 thing in Vancouver on just, the 11th of June. And we saw his show, and they told us not to tape, so we didn't, but somebody did, and they dropped the tape off. So we're going to present it to you because we think that it's important that we take these pivotal bits of information out of the realm of property and into the realm of necessity and public domain and people's rights to know about their government, their right to know the truth. So I asked Mike about it at the beginning of the show, and he said as long as you're not making money off it, and considering how much money that Pot TV loses every month, we don't make that all back. We're just sending it out to you for free because we think everyone in the world should know it for nothing. But we will promote Mike's website here. Shameless promotion. It's www.copvcia.com or www.fromthewilderness.com, and it goes to the same place. And then you can order his Truth and Lies of 9/11 video, $24.95 plus shipping. I highly recommend it. Or this Global Outlook magazine. It's really snazzy, and there's lots and lots of information in it, jam-packed full of information just on how your government is cheating you. And he has lots of different information, probably the greatest collection of information on these topics available. So what does Mike talk about? Well, Mike talks about 9/11 and just how much the government knew and when they knew it and who warned them about it and when, and all this sort of indicators that all the people who bet that American Airlines stock options would drop, or that people would remove their money from that. And all the indicators that this was planned a long time ahead of time. It was in the interest of the oil companies taking oil out of the Middle East to have taken over Afghanistan. And basically the excuse was that Afghanistan was attacking the United States, and they engineered that. They basically financed the guys who attacked them and gave them basically the training, the information, and the instructions, and the visas, and everything that they needed to do it, and then looked the other way as it was happening. And people were warning them about it from all sources. And it just comes out, the more and more and more, we're living in the age of information, and all this information is coming out and gathering and collecting and coming out in these great packages. And that's what Mike does. He gathers information like Chomsky does with human rights all over the world, and And like Chris Bennett does with cannabis in the past, Mike Ruppert covers this latest fake war very well, like a journalist should, only dealing with facts, not going into the space aliens and all that weird stuff, and just following the money and not asking for people to be lined up against the wall and shot, but just for our government to start working properly and correctly and being accountable to us. So, with that in mind, we urge you to check out the links that we're going to provide for you. We urge you to check out Mike Ruppert's stuff. Order it if you can. Support him if you can. He's really working hard. I'm surprised he hasn't been shot yet. He's really working hard to get the truth out, and so that we don't suffer from the ignorance and from being sheep. I think the most important thing is he's setting up is that the next wave of attacks are going to be biological based, and that the smallpox vaccines have already been bought so that they can jab us with all these vaccines. And that's why we're going to include a little bit of information about the Horowits information at the end of the show. A little bit of information backing up just how bad the government is with their vaccination programs and their biological weapons. So it's going to be a heavy show. Watch with someone you love, and then take the information and do something about it. Learn more about it and put the pressure on, get the information out, and do whatever you can to insist that they don't get away with it, to stop them from getting away with it by exposing it before it happens. That's what we urge everybody out there to do, is to get this information out there and expose these criminals, these drug war protection racketeers and these terrorist protection racketeers, expose them for what they are, and we'll get to peace eventually, and justice and freedom, and the perks that come with it.
The economy controls the $600 billion or whatever interest. Let's say, for example, globalization or the G8 controls the laundering and the ownership of the cheap liquid cash of the drug trade, cannot be challenged by any other economic competitor. That's the other piece of the puzzle that I want you to get. Now let's start taking a look at this. Now some people say there's no proof that CIA deals drugs. Ha! There's lots of proof. I got hundreds and hundreds of pages of it. That's why I've never been allowed to testify in Congress, even though the House Intelligence Committee came and copied 6,000 pages of my records about 2 years ago. But we're going to look at a couple of those pieces because I want you to get in your mind and your map about how important drug money is and how easy it is to prove how drug money is. This is a letter that was written in 1982 to Bill Casey, the CIA director, and it's signed by William French Smith, Ronald Reagan's first Attorney General. Now, when Reagan got into office, CIA has dealt drugs since as long as there has been a CIA. As a matter of fact, they dealt drugs before there was a CIA, going back to World War II. But the role of the drug trade has gotten progressively more important to sustaining the economy. Well, the Reagan administration knew that they were going to have this huge war in Central America. We called it the Contra War. They also knew that there was going to be a monstrous explosion in the drug trade. I firmly believe the whole Contra War was about that and nothing else. Everything else was recovered. In 1979, domestic U.S. cocaine consumption was about 80 metric tons. By 1987, at the peak of the Contra War, domestic cocaine consumption in the U.S. was 600 metric tons. Big jump, all managed by the CIA. Now, there's a problem in that there are laws in the U.S. that say that if, I can't see anybody out there, so I normally interact, but all I see is this blackness out there. Let's say somebody out there is a manager in a U.S. government agency, and one of his or her employees breaks the law. That manager is required to tell the FBI and the Department of Justice that one of his employees is breaking the law. That makes perfectly good sense. Well, these guys are all lawyers, and they don't like to cover their butts. So knowing what was coming by way of the explosion in cocaine use, they had a two-stage negotiation process. First, they took everyone at CIA who was not a case officer. That's the highest rung on the food chain. That includes career contract agents, foreign assets, foreign informants, employees of proprietary companies, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's like all these categories. They all take their orders from CIA. They all get paychecks from CIA. But they changed the law to define all those people now as being not employees. But then even more, they went one step further. Now, after a long series of negotiations, they completed an MOU. It's called a Memorandum of Understanding. And the MOU says, it's right here, it says, in light of these provisions, that's all these negotiations, and in view of the fine cooperation the Drug Enforcement Administration has received from CIA, no formal requirement regarding the reporting of narcotics violations has been included in these procedures. That is black and white proof evidence of a conspiracy. Right there. You no longer have to report it when you're not employees or dealing drugs. Now here's a catch. Two people whom I have identified as being key to the negotiation of this whole thing. One of them was Ken Starr. That's the guy who prosecuted Bill Clinton. The other was a guy named Rick Cinquegrana, C-I-N-Q-U-E-G-R-A-N-A. It's included in the CIA's Inspector General report, which came out October the 8th of '98. And guess what? The staff director for the Joint House-Senate Intelligence Committee closed-door investigations into 9/11 is none other than Rick Cinquegrana. How many people are going to be able to sleep at night out there honestly believing that congressional hearings or an independent commission? We just had yesterday Hillary Clinton or was Dick Gephardt saying we need an independent presidential commission to get to the bottom of this. How many people believe that? Is the world that insane after all of the presidential commissions we've been through that have covered up all the crimes? It's a different world now. But let's look a little bit more about the drugs. I love this. It's one of my favorite documents. That's a C-130 Hercules. They're great airplanes. They've been around for a long time. In the late 70s, early 80s, and up to the 90s, actually, the CIA took some 28 C-130 Hercules aircraft, which they moved out through the U.S. Department of Defense, DOD, and then moved them into the U.S. Forest Service, who then gave them to a bunch of private contractors throughout the states for the purpose of fighting forest fires. You see, there's a lot of fires burning around here. You had a Dandy up north of Edmonton when I was there, too. And these private contractors, though, had all kinds of CIA connections. Some of them may have been proprietaries, they were contract air operators. The problem is, though, that of these 28 C-130s, I'm along in front of the screen, of these 28 C-130s, a whole bunch of them wound up in places like Mexico, Panama, Peru, Colombia, Angola, Pakistan, and a whole lot of places where there were no forest fires. And they weren't hauling fire retardant. I'm shocked. As a matter of fact, one of these C-130s was seized in Mexico City. It was being run by a private company, Agua Postal de Mexico, in 1996 with $1 billion worth of cocaine on board. $1 billion. There was a court case in Chicago, talked all about it. These C-130s throughout the 80s and early 90s were flying 2,000 and 3,000 kilos of cocaine at a time on the military bases all over the U.S., including in California, China Lake, and El Toro Marine Air Station. One brave Marine officer, Colonel Jim Sabo, who was the chief of Air Ops at El Toro, discovered this, and he was murdered. He was going to blow the whistle. Somebody snuck into his backyard, bashed in his skull. He was unconscious. He aspirated blood into his lungs for 15 minutes, the autopsy found. Then someone shoved a shotgun so hard down his throat it sheared off his uvula, and the blast was behind, anterior to the uvula, way down his throat. And the Navy ruled it suicide. I ultimately sponsored a conference in 1993 with a group of families whose brothers, husbands, sons had supposedly committed suicide. The numbers kept growing, and there were ultimately 109 such families, none of whom ever received any justice. So take a look at this letter. This is a letter to George Leonard, Associate Chief of the U.S. Forest Service, from Kenneth Cohen,